Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormack, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And today we are going to be talking about something we haven't talked about in a while, and that is Alpha TransForm. And specifically, we're going to be talking about one of the more complicated, not complicated, but one of the less understood portions of TransForm, which is the Alpha TransForm permissions system. Just as a reminder, Alpha TransForm, a complementary product to Alpha Anywhere, it lets you build data collection forms, but really data collection apps, because each of these forms is highly programmable. It comes it comes both on the web and as a mobile app that you can install on your phone. Just look for Alpha TransForm in either Google Play or in the iOS App Store. And you can use these to make sure that you're, sorry for a second. And you can use these to do data collection. So a lot of times people use these out in the field if they're performing field service things, types of operations, or they're used a lot now in manufacturing quality, even on the shop floor, checking for things as they come off. They're used to perform 5S audits. They're used to perform a whole bunch of things. And now with the free tier, you can use it for your own personal projects as well. Before I go any further, though, just a quick thing I like to do is just make sure that you can hear me and you can see my screen. You should be seeing a yellow light bulb there on the screen. Is that correct? Just someone type into the questions box of the chat window. That would be great. Absolutely. Cool. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. So I mentioned before some of the smaller projects that you can do. You might want to do like a project punch list or maybe some sort of inventory. Some people have used it for bird watching logs. A lot of people have been using it actually for keeping track of teams and events and clubs and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do, and I recommend, if you haven't done it, to go over to transform.alphasoftware.com and sign up for your free account. Today, though, what we're going to be talking about is the permissions portion. And I'm going to actually leave PowerPoint here, and we're going to jump right into our live presentation. So let me go over here into Alpha TransForm. Okay. So if you have used Alpha TransForm before, you're probably already familiar a little bit with the permission system, and you would know it from over here, the Manage User Roles. So here is my free account, and I happen to have 4 users here. I think I'm only allowed 3 in my free account, but that's okay. The last person won't be able to log in. But you'll notice that as I select myself, this might be up here at the top, I have various roles that I can assign myself: user, account administrator, form designer, and so on. This person down here, Bob at example.com, is only set as a user, so they can't do all of the things that I can as the account administrator, form designer, and so on. But you're probably wondering, so these are kind of self-explanatory. A form designer lets you design new forms. Management console lets you access the management console. This one is a little bit less clear what supervisor does, but it lets you change roles in certain statuses. But these are ones that come with Alpha TransForm out of the box, these roles. You are not required to use them. You can rename them, you can delete them, you can add new ones. And you do all of that, you do all sort of that fine-tuning control over here on the permissions tab, which I'm going to click on right now. Okay, the first time I saw this tab, I said, oh boy, what is going on? There's a lot of, I see 3, 4 different panes here. What do they do? How do I use it? So I'm going to just give you the quick rundown. Let's start over here at the bottom left pane, the roles pane. The roles pane you'll recognize from the home tab, which has got the user, account administrator, and so on. And these are the roles that are currently defined for the account. This is a brand new account, so these are the default ones that you get. And you'll see for each one of these, I can click on them. I can actually change their name, and I can change the description. Now, this just changes the name and description. It doesn't change what the roles can do. We'll get to that in a minute. But these are the ones right here. There are the roles. Okay, so the roles seem pretty familiar. You can assign one person or a person to one or more roles. Up here are statuses. That might be a little bit less clear. Statuses refer to a field, the status field on a form. So every form has got a status field built into it. You are not required to use it. In fact, a lot of people never use the status field, but we do include it in case you want to use it. And we've come up with 4 default statuses: open, submitted, approval, and closed. All right, so what we imagined, I guess, when we were setting it up is that open, which this is the case, when you first create a new form, it's going to be set to open status. When you submit that form, it may or may not be set to submit. It just depends on how your form is set up. But typically it is set to submitted. And approval and closed out of the box aren't really used, but you could use them if you wanted to assign, say, a supervisor a role that when something goes into approval, that supervisor can approve it before it is closed. Okay, and that's just how we imagine you might use it, but you can use it in lots of different ways. So let me show you how you actually set that up. Right up here in the middle, take a look at this. It's called the Combined Group Status Role Permissions List. It's rather a long name, but think of it as just groups. We'll just call it groups for now. We have two groups that you come with out of the box. The one is called Simple Group, and this is the one that's used by default all the time unless you specify otherwise. So Simple Group, and below Simple Group, we have one called Form with Approval. That's another group. Let's take a look here up at this first group, and let's see what goes into it. Okay, so with a simple group, the first thing you do when you're defining any type of group is you decide who's allowed to create new form instances. You do that over here just by clicking on this arrow right here. And so here are the types, and you'll notice that each one of these roles here now appears over here. Should we let account administrators create new form instances? Absolutely. Management console? Sure. Probably also want to allow the browser user to do it. That's someone who's logged in, not into TransForm Central, but into the browser filler, the web version of the mobile app, if you will. So that might be a thing that you'd want to do. So I've given them that permission. Now, like elsewhere in TransForm, whenever you make a change to something like this, it doesn't get propagated immediately to TransForm. You do have to tell it that you'd like to save your changes. And as always, the link for that is up here at the left, right here in orange. Click here to save changes. And now when I say upload and replace, from now on, my browser users will be able to create new forms and new form instances. Okay, so the next one is browse form types. So form types are when you have not created a form yet, which forms which forms do you have available to you to look at? If you don't have this turned on for browser user, they won't even know the kind of form that they can create. So you kind of have to turn these both on at the same time. All right, hopefully that's clear. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now we've set it up so anyone who's marked as browser user is allowed to look at the different form types and create a new form instance of that type. Okay. Now let's take a look through here. You'll see some boxes down here with some green headlines, open, submitted, approval, and closed. And if you remember, those actually match up with the statuses, open, submitted, approval, and closed. So how a group works is as follows. When a form is open, you can decide what an account administrator should do, a form designer should do, management console, supervisor, or browser list should do. So for each one of these statuses, you'll see that each of the roles is represented down here as well. So what I have set now is for an account administrator in the simple group should pretty much always be allowed to, well, we have that different than management console, but let's say the account administrator, we want it to be able to list forms, edit forms, and delete forms. We also would allow them to change the status of a form. So if a form is open, we want to allow them to change that to submitted, approval, and closed maybe. So that dictates what they are permitted to do in the form filler. So that's the mobile app. So if you have the permission of account administrator, you now have the ability to list all the different types of forms that are there and edit and delete the forms, but only edit and delete forms that are assigned to you. That's basically how the system works. You can't, within the mobile app, look at forms that are assigned to someone else. All right. So for each one of these, you basically go and you set the permissions. When a form is marked as open, what should a form designer be allowed to do? Well, maybe your form designer, you don't want to allow them to do anything, other than design forms. So you can just leave that alone. Management console, same thing. Supervisor, and browser user, these two are not used except for browser user, which has access to the form filler. I'm going to go ahead and say that they're allowed to use those. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and I've uploaded replaced. So now what this means is that our different roles will correspond to certain permission types. So when I'm back here in the home screen, and I say, for example, that Bob is a account administrator now, and I can set his role. Also keep in mind, you can control click and select multiple roles. But if you want to select his role, I'm going to go ahead and click set role. And we've set the role for that user. Now we've given Bob as the account administrator a fair amount of power when you look in the permissions tab. Now keep in mind that supervisor or browser user or account administrator, they only have all of these options for forms that are open. You want to go ahead and do the same thing for forms that are submitted, approved, and closed. On the other hand, you may never end up using these statuses, in the submitted, approval, and closed, in which case you're only going to be using open as your status, so you can ignore the ones that are below that. Okay, so let's pop over into the last part that I want to show you, and that is that, why would you have multiple groups? Well, this is called the simple group, and we've already defined for the simple group what's allowed to happen. But let's say we made a special group here. This is called forms with approval, but let's say we made it one that's, let's say forms with approval are ones that only account administrators should have the ability to look at. So what I could do is I could turn off the privileges for everyone except for the account administrator, okay? And then what I would do is I would go into my form design, pop over to designer here, give that a moment to load, there we go. And my form, under advanced features, when I'm creating my form, has got a section here called the status role permissions group. That refers to, of course, the groups section here. So, oops, back to designer. All right. So what I can see here is there's the simple group and there's form with approval. And if I leave this blank, simple group is the one that's going to be used. I'm going to say 90% of accounts out there probably don't use the permissions very much. Maybe they just haven't figured out how to use it, or they don't yet have a need for it. So they just leave it blank, and that's fine. And it'll just default to simple group. But I just wanted to show you all the options that you have here, because you have an awful lot of fine granular control. You can restrict certain people from seeing certain forms. You can restrict certain people from creating certain forms, deleting or editing things after changes have been made. So pretty much the sky is the limit when it comes to permissions there. So it's a very granular system, but as you can see, it takes a couple minutes to sort of wrap your head around. So that's what I wanted to cover today. Let me see if we've got questions. Question: what links a company's account together? For example, what prevents multiple users from creating separate TransForm accounts that aren't centrally controlled by the designated company administrator? Is it tied to the domain name of the company? No, it isn't, as a matter of fact. You can go ahead as a user, and this is a really important point, is that your account and your user are two different things. So I am logged in as me, Dave McCormack, and this is my account, one of multiple accounts. If I wanted to go ahead and create a new account, I would, but that account would be only for my own purpose. It would basically create a new free tier account, and it would not tie back to the company's account. So add users, or sorry, over here, create new account. If I wanted to do that, you just basically type in and create an account name. It is not going to be linked to this other name. The only thing that'll link it together is me. I'm the person who has those multiple accounts. Now, if I had created a new account, like let's call this my webinar account, and I said okay. And what that should do is that should build an account for me. It has, and it's logged me into it. And there it is. It's called my webinar. What I can do is I can just add people to this account. So I'm going to say add users to account. That's usually the first thing. And all I do is just type in email. So bob@example.com. I click OK, and now I've invited Bob to my account. And if Bob doesn't have his own TransForm email registered with the TransForm system, Bob will get an email letting him sign up and join your account. If he does have an account, he'll just get a notification that he can join your account if he wants to. So there's no direct connection there. Hopefully that makes sense. Do we have any other questions? We do not. Wonderful. Well, before we go today, I have some ideas for some upcoming webinar topics. I want to run them by you, and maybe you could type into the chat window which ones seem the best to you, or which ones I've omitted. Which ones we probably should cover that I haven't. So we've had some questions again back on reports, and that has to do with passing in values to reports and passing in images to reports. If anyone would find that interesting, go ahead and say, yeah, that'd be cool. People have also been interested in just generally passing values from one page to another. So how do I get a value from my web page into my JavaScript, into my report, saved into my database and stuff like that? So that's something I wanted to show you, how you can move data from different places around at different levels. Another one we'll see is, so passing values. Okay, great, awesome. Another one is installing, configuring IIS, if anyone is interested in that. If you haven't gone to the cloud and you've decided that you would like to run an application server yourself, that can actually be a very good thing to do. So that's IIS. Another is build process. How do you build process for mobile apps, and specifically Cordova? How do I package up my app so that if I wanted to, I could put it into the Apple Store or Google Play? So if you have any interest in that, let me know. The other one is the calendar control. For those of you who showed up to our dev day a few months ago, we did during our breakout session show off the calendar control. It requires a little bit of skill to use, but not too much, and we'd be happy to do a demonstration on that. And the other one, last but not least, is charting, adding charts and graphs to your report. So go ahead and let me know which ones you think you would like to see. And then we've got one here. How do I download a dynamic CSV file? That's actually a good one too. So let me just write that down. Dynamic CSV file. Cool. All right, charting, another for passing values. All right, excellent. Well, all right, we will cover all of those then, and we'll probably put an emphasis on passing values and charting as the first two. Cool. Well, that's all I've got today. Thank you, everyone, for showing up for our little short session. Hope to see you again next Wednesday at our next Alpha software demo and Q&A webcast. In the meantime, if you've got questions, of course, send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. Take care and stay well. Bye-bye.